and it's live. So go ahead whenever.
Yeah, so wax poetically. That's tough. Full disclosure, I sent a text while Tennessee was playing Murray State, and I said I was trying to get ahead of the story. And I was trying to say that Tennessee is not going to be very good this year. I told that to a few individuals close in my life. I told them that, and then Tennessee went on to win by like 30 in that second half. And then they go on the road, and that is a road game against Washington. Let's call it what it is. And they just beat the shit out of them. So do I think they're the best team in the SEC right now? Honestly, no. I still don't. I think that they are playing with a chip on their shoulder right now, but I'm very concerned about how sustainable this is. They really, in the game against Washington, they only had their starters scored like every single point except for 1 point. And, they have Jordan Bowden, who's really taken a leap this year. Lamonte Turner really hasn't gotten hot yet, but he's been distributing the ball great. Both those guys actually are probably going to enter the 1,000-point club, which is awesome on Wednesday night for their game. But Tennessee still lacks a front court presence. You can only have John Fulkerson do what he has to do for so long. And he's got a horrible, horrible long hair with one of those I don't even know what you call them. It's not a ponytail, but it's like a hair. It's like what you would see on a high school field hockey team. All the girls wearing those.
Like a man bun? Is that what you're getting?
No, it's not a man bun. It's like it's not a man bun. And it's like I don't know. It's a bad look. You just look them up.
Regardless.
Yeah, it's not a good look. But anyway, so that's our starting center. The real big surprise for us is Yves Pons, who's just a freak athlete. And he's kind of making that next step jump for us. And the star freshman, the 5-star freshman, Josiah James, not that good so far. So hopefully he comes into his own. But it's a long way of me saying I don't think that they are there yet. I think LSU is a better team. I think Auburn's a better team. And I don't think Kentucky's a better team.
Well, so you are our resident SEC guy here. So I guess elaborate on that if you can. At this point, the SEC is a complete mess of what we thought it would be, even though we're only like 3-4 games in the season. Florida sucks. And I thought last week that Florida shouldn't even be ranked. And I believe that my opinion was backed up by the fact that they lost again to an unranked UConn team who, I don't think UConn's any good either. So Florida sucks, and I picked them to win that conference. Most people picked Kentucky to win that conference. Would you say, I don't know what the odds would be, but is it still those teams, 2 teams in the field, or do we feel that gap, even if it's just after 3 or 4 games, is really much closer than it was 2 weeks ago?
I think it's closer. I don't think Florida sucks just yet. I know that they've stumbled out of the gate here, but they're still going to be the same Florida team that we've seen in recent years. I saw the game, obviously the game against UConn.
They could literally be 1-3 right now. I just want to put, they almost lost to Towson at home too.
Yeah, they could. And you were, to your credit, you were on it after that first game when you kept talking about how they didn't beat North Florida by much. I'll give you credit to that. But I don't think they suck just yet. I think it's going to take some time, but they'll be in the tournament when it matters. But I don't think they're going to win they still could win the SEC. These teams can get hot, and Florida typically gets hot at the end of the year. If you recall, they always, outside of those years in the late 2000s with Noah and Corey Brewer and Taurine Green and Lee Humphrey and all those guys, outside of that, the teams that make the tournament, they always have like 12 to 13 losses. But they get in and they make Sweet 16 or an Elite 8 run. So I think it's premature to count them out of it at this point, especially considering the talent that they have on their team. To more correctly answer your question, definitely the gap has shrunk. I think Auburn has proven to be a very dangerous team. They start a lot of – it's kind of plug and play with Bruce Pearl. It's just next man up for them. It's still going to be an explosive offense, still going to be high octane. And they're doing what they've done in the recent years. LSU, I don't know. Like I was getting chirped at for this one too. Like they go and play in an extremely emotional game in Richmond against VCU, where you got students in the crowd dressed as FBI agents to get in Will Wade's head.
That was phenomenal, by the way.
Yeah,
that was phenomenal.
I mean, that's how you be a fan right there. And they're getting killed in the first half, and then LSU comes storming back. Like I know they lost the game, but to say, oh my God, the SEC is terrible after that, like get a fucking grip, man. Get a grip. Do you think that makes them a bad team? Do you think if LSU were to play VCU in, let's call it Spokane, Washington, at the Friday 4 p.m. game, do you think that VCU is going to win that one? There's no chance in hell. So let's look at this through the correct lens here, and rather than having these reactionary takes, which, our boy Subi loves to do.
Well, I will say, in a counter argument, if you say that the top 3 teams in the conference going into the season were Florida, Kentucky, and arguably LSU, right? We can mix Auburn in there too. Auburn almost lost to South Alabama. They only won by a point. And then Florida's lost twice. Kentucky's lost to Evansville, and LSU has lost to VCU. Shouldn't these teams be? I mean, I know VCU's like decent, but shouldn't these teams, if they're a good Power 5 team, because I was really high on the SEC in the preseason. I thought they were going to show a market improvement over what we see from maybe the average year of like maybe 4 to 6 teams. Obviously, they had a good year last year. But I thought the bottom was going to come up. And in reality, I think I was wrong. I think the top came down. Although my prediction might still reign true at the end of the year, I think it might be because the winner of this conference, who I may have thought was going to be something like 15-3, might be more like 13-5, which will allow some of those lower level teams to pick up a couple extra wins against like a Florida or a Kentucky or even an LSU and an Auburn. So I was definitely higher on the whole conference and was expecting to have more conversations about how well the SEC started and not how badly. I don't know if that's the word you want to use, but maybe how disappointing. I don't know. It's been thus far, I guess.
This whole almost lost thing it's ridiculous. Like, okay,
South Alabama.
Kansas is playing East Tennessee State right now. They're up by 12. Did they almost lose that game? I mean, UVA almost lost to Vermont tonight. I mean, we can do this to anyone.
Catamounts, tough team.
Yeah, but like, come on. Look at the team look at the team and what they have and envision how they would perform against other good teams. That's the way to do it. It's not judge them because they didn't score enough points against, insert terrible school here.
But isn't that how we judge teams, like with the points on the board?
No, this isn't college football. This is you play, and if you beat a good team, then you move up. Unless you're Dick Vitale or that other guy, Steven Means, and we'll get to that later in the show. But typically, when you beat a team, you should move above that team. But some of these college basketball writers just seem to ignore the results of games. But
I can't wait to get to dive into that here in a minute. But so let's get out of the SEC for a second then. And I know that you're in chilly Minneapolis right now and have been for a couple days. What is the weather like in Minneapolis right now?
It sucks. It's the same. You wait. There's daylight. And I say daylight with a grain of salt because it's not daylight. It's just a gray sky for about 6 hours during the day. These people that live here, that's just dark in perpetuity. That's always dark
in perpetuity.
Cold. It's like, I don't know how you do it, but hey, you're from Alaska. You're probably used to that.
Well, yeah, that's why that's why today was the coldest day I've sustained in 9 months, and it was 76 degrees today. There's a reason why I moved out of there.
Good move. By the way, Maryland's only up by 8 over Fairfield.
Yeah,
game. They actually move them down. Hold on, I'm not done. Gonzaga's only up by 1 against UT Austin at halftime, so they suck. We should bump them down. And Kansas is only up by 10 against Etsu with 10 minutes with 51 seconds left. So, oh man, who are we going to rank next week?
I would agree with all of those sentiments. Move them all down. So, well, that gets me into what my question would be to you and what I was getting at. Has there been a team so far, and I know we kind of talk about this every week and not necessarily like in a direct question, but has there been any team so far that has really struck you as, oh, wow, this team is way better than I anticipated, at least through the first 3 or 4? I know we're still in the part of the season where we're really Monday morning quarterbacking this whole thing, but that's really all we have to go off of to this point until we get into feast week next week where we get some big games again. There's really not a lot of tests on the schedule between today and kind of that Thanksgiving area where all the big tournaments happen. In fact, no ranked teams at this point even play on, I believe, Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday leading in into all the tournaments next week. So you might have a decent line of demarcation here, even though it's only the first 10% of the season. Are there any teams that you can point to that are maybe a little better than you anticipated so far?
Yeah, Ohio State. Ohio
Yeah,
State's the next
agreed.
team for me.
Agreed.
All you have to do is watch them to kind of button up exactly what we're talking about. You saw them play against Villanova and just run them out of their own gym. And this Ohio State team, it kind of goes back to what they had last year. I recall that in the first round of the tournament, they were matched up with Houston, if I recall correctly. And in that game, Caleb Wesson was their guy. He's this. If you don't know who he is, he's this big, fat, undersized, perfect college basketball player. He's chubby. He's a big old boy. He's got post moves. He'll remind you of Jared Sullinger out there with a little sip of DeJuan Blair. He can shoot the ball a little bit as well. He's the guy that runs through for them. But they have this other dude, Kyle Young, who's kind of just playing for a cup of coffee the previous few years, but he's really emerged this season. And they got a great coach. All right, they got everything you want. They got Chris Holtman. One of those Chris Mack type guys you can coach.
Just name them all Chris.
Yeah,
right.
Just a guy named Chris from the Midwest. Those are the kind of coaches you want. But Ohio State's everything. They are an under the radar team, and I brought up the game against Houston last year because in that game, Houston, they had so many wins during the season. Everybody loved them. Everybody loved Kelvin Sampson. But in that 6-11 matchup, the spread was like shockingly close. I recall it being less than 5. And all the sharp bettors in Vegas were all on Ohio State. I remember thinking, like, why? Ohio State had so many losses during the regular season. They were only good playing at home. And then I watched the game, and you could tell that they were athletic. You could tell that the only guy with any skill on the team was Wesson. But the way they played very fast. They played very intense, and that's really starting to trend season. So I could see them being a big-time threat moving forward, especially in a Big Ten that sucks this year.
No, and I that is one of my teams that I would agree, I think easily is pointed to as a team that's better, or not better, but already accomplishing a little more than we had anticipated. I mean, they smoked Nova the other night, just crushed them. And, you look at Michigan State has a loss already, albeit to Kentucky, but as we just discussed, maybe Kentucky isn't as good as we anticipated. Maryland, we were kind of up and down with about how we felt about them in the Big Ten. I think Ohio State should be right there. And my Purdue pick, actually Purdue for me is probably the team that has performed the worst when it comes to the expectations so far, because I picked them as my sleeper pick to win the conference and they've lost twice. But if I had to pick, and I want you to please tell me if I'm being a homer when I say this, but I really think Oregon especially, but Arizona are the two teams so far that are really outperforming their preseason rank. Arizona has looked, and Oregon in the same ilk, have looked every bit as good as any team in the country thus far. And, Oregon obviously has a name win against Memphis. Arizona doesn't have a name win necessarily quite yet. But when we talk about the close loss thing, they've blown everybody out, including a team that Subi was high on in Illinois with Brad Underwood. They took them to school in the second half. And I think we have Arizona has a guy named Zeke Naji. He was a 4-star recruit that's our center there. He's 33 of 39 from the field this year. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
That is pretty good. And I'm going to warn you right now, stay away from Oregon. All right. That's my team.
Oh, hey, don't worry. I have a West Coast school. I don't need another one. Don't worry.
I don't want you, Subi, anyone that you know, anyone that you associate with hopping on that bandwagon, because much like I did with Seton Hall in my tweet, I did the same exact tweet with Oregon before that game against Memphis. You guys can go check the books. You can go check the ledgers. I put it out there. I've been on Oregon from the outset, and now you got people saying that they're the best team in the country.
So here's a question for you, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think before this season, we would have anticipated the SEC being a little better than the Pac-12. I think right now Pac-12 is far and away better than the SEC right now, at least how they opened up the season. You have teams like Oregon and Arizona who clearly look awesome, and then the top of the SEC does not look awesome at all. I think that if the usual power rankings of college basketball start with the ACC and the Big Ten up top, and then usually the SEC and the Pac-12 come in around that 4 or 5 range. I definitely think the Pac-12 has started off much stronger, much stronger, with 2 potential Elite 8, Final 4 speculation type of teams. Whereas I think the SEC, I think any speculation of any of their teams going far in the tournament has fallen way back in comparison.
Yeah, I don't know. I think hold your horses a bit here. You got teams like Cal, undefeated. Didn't they win like 6 games last year? I know they got a new coach, but Cal sucks. And they're
right.
But I mean, yeah, you guys don't have a lot of losses in the conference. Congratulations. It's November 17th. You guys are really killing it so far.
Hey, you're the guy pushing for Final 4 picks already at this part of the year. So if you want it here, let's get after it then. This conference is looking fucking awesome. So they're all going to the Final 4. Every team in the Pac-12 is going to the Final 4 this year.
Oregon is looking awesome. Yeah, that was a great pick by me, and I'm going to stand by that pick for a while. I will tell you, I told you guys this at the beginning of the year. Watched Arizona play yet, but I kind of like what you got. I told you I'm a Nico Mannion guy solely based off his look.
He has looked every bit of and more of what was expected of him previous to the year.
He's like Dante DiVincenzo, getting like a severe European makeover.
Well, Nico is Italian. I didn't know that there were ginger Italians. That's actually new to me.
Trust me, they exist.
Okay. This, I learned something new every day, and that's one thing I learned about Nico here this offseason is that there are gingers in Italy.
They're gingers in Mexico too. Canelo Alvarez.
Yeah, right. Light skin. He's light skin and ginger. He's Mexico's Blake Griffin.
You can't judge people based off the geography of where they're from. Like, for instance, that Zeke Nanji guy that you just listed, he's from Minnesota.
He's from right next door to where you're at right now.
Yeah, I might run out, see if I can see any of his buddies out here.
Hey, and he's from a similar – I don't think he went to the same high school, but I think there were maybe rival high schools of the Duke Jones brothers. They're in Apple something, Minnesota.
All I know, Zeke Nanji's hometown is Lakeville, Minnesota. Real creative with that name right there. I think there's 10,000 lakes in this state, and they named their town Lakeville.
I have a feeling the white man named that town. I don't think that's a native language, that Lakeville, Minnesota. So I'm going to ride just because I am a West Coast guy, but I actually don't think that this is a biased take as I back up into the camera and show my Arizona shirt that I am wearing right now. I actually do think that Oregon, Ohio State, and Arizona are the 3 teams thus far this year that have really shown us the most that they were ranked in the late teens and 20s. And despite the fact that it's early, they have shown every single bit and more of outperforming, I should say, their expectations, at least this early. Obviously, a lot of ways to go, a lot of things that can transpire in this time. But what's really nice about say like in Arizona, for example, or in Oregon is kind of actually a better example of this is Oregon's clearly going to get better because they're missing arguably their best player still, or at least the top 3 player in Fale Dante. So there's the fact that they look this good early and they still have a huge presence down low that they're going to get back really leads me to believe that this Pac-12 race is going to be someone's going to have to win like 15 games to win this conference, because the top end, you can say what you want about Cal or whatever, but the top end is clearly really good. And even though Washington lost to Tennessee, they still have a nice win over Baylor. So I think they're kind of sticking with the script of that they have a lot to figure out because they have a lot of freshmen. And I think that's kind of what everybody thought about the year that they were going to have ahead. but they're still an impressive team and they're still a talented team. So clearly that race for the Pac-12 was gonna be a tightly contested race, but I think now we're seeing that it's really going to be maybe even tighter than anticipated. But I'm happy that you're riding with a West Coast school, because I have major bones to pick about college basketball writers and East Coast bias and how that affects West Coast basketball. And I know you have a lot on your mind about the AP poll and how it's voted on. I want you to really get a lot off your chest here, Shark.
Yeah, well, it's actually the inverse of what, or the opposite of what you just said. It's West Coast bias. Tennessee
please play one vote ever that had one West Coast bias situation ever.
It was the one that I happened to catch, so that's how I'm going to take it. But Tennessee played Washington. All right, so this is all courtesy of Gary Parrish, big Memphis guy. I know you got the spreadsheet up there, Taylor, that you'll be able to elaborate on my points here. But Tennessee played Washington on, what was it, Saturday, right? They played Washington on Saturday. They go out there. They beat them from start to finish, going away, however you want to describe it. The poll, Tennessee was unranked at the time. Washington was ranked number 20. The polls come out on Monday, and Gary Parrish, to his credit, he's been doing this for a while, where he has this column on CBS Sports, Poll Attacks, where it's basically the watchdog of these voters in the AP poll, and just calls them out whenever he can. And one guy, I believe his name is Stephen Means. I want to make sure it's Stephen. I don't want to defame anyone. But it's this guy Means. He's a beat writer for Ohio State. He, despite the fact that Tennessee beat Washington, he decided to still rank, not only not reflect that in his rankings, but he moved Washington up. And he didn't even include Tennessee in the top 25. So, you know, our boy Meansy over there is really paying attention to what's going on. But in an epic, and I mean truly epic, display of FOMO right here for Subi, Dickie V. Normally I'm defending Dickie V all the time, and we all know that Subi hates Dickie V. Dickie V did the exact same thing. Oh, you can hate Dickie V. I love Dickie V. I love everything that he's about, but he did the exact same thing. But to Dickie V's credit, he moved Tennessee into the top 25. So he wasn't as outrageous as our boy Means in Ohio State. But Dickie V still put Washington ahead of Tennessee, despite the fact that this was played on a neutral court in the Pacific Northwest, and Tennessee won from start to finish. So these guys, maybe they're very subjective in their look. They don't care about the actual games that are being played. But it just goes to show what a farce this whole system is. And it is important, too. Like, this is a big deal. Whether I know I'm making light of it right now, and I know people can make light of it throughout the season. But we all know that once we get into late February and into early March, and we are doing bracket projections, and you are looking at wins against top 25 teams, and you're looking at RPI rankings and all that, this is significant for people on the selection committee. They care about how many wins against top 25 teams that you have. So Washington remaining in the top 25 or Tennessee not being moved up as high as they should, it might not impact them directly, but it could impact other teams. So these people that are given the esteem of being a voter in the top 25, they need to take it seriously. I mean, come on, Stephen Means.
So I have Means poll right in front of me. You and I were talking before the show about this, but if any of our listeners want some really interesting reading material where they're bored at work, go to collegepolltracker.com, and you can see where everybody that voted on the AP poll put all the teams. They provide a list. They provide biases against that writers clearly show when they vote teams on one side or the other against the average or the mean. Another thing that Means did here is he put Memphis ahead of Oregon. The same week that Oregon beat Memphis.
Dickie V moved Washington up 6 spots after their loss. Like, come on.
So a guy like Dickie V is let me tell you how much I dislike this guy, but he's a classic example. He's just such a bandwagoner for whatever. It's like he gets a fleeting thought and he bandwagons his own mind into doing that. The other night, he actually said a positive word about the Pac-12, which is the first time in at least 25 years that he's done that. So the fact that in his mind he said that, he now is just riding with everything about the Pac-12. He was the highest Arizona voter this week, too. Had Arizona up to 9, which isn't necessarily absurd because they're undefeated and whatever. But not moving the teams that lose down is ridiculous. And that's a classic problem that we see out here out west. And it might be working, I guess. Maybe it's going to work in the Pac-12's favor for the first time ever. Is maybe there will finally be some notion that the Pac-12 is good. And so instead of going the opposite way, which is usual, and saying the Pac-12 is bad, so the writers just kind of go, oh, well, let's move all these teams in front of Pac-12 people. Maybe we'll see this year that there's the what's the word I'm looking for? The narrative that the Pac-12 is good. And so we get the Dickie V's in the world to move teams up in losses. This is a classic SEC situation in football where Washington suffered a good loss and moved up in the standings. But the overarching point is about what you're saying is it's exactly why I don't put any credence into the coaches poll, because the coaches don't actually vote. It's like some intern that pretty much puts it together, because I'm pretty sure Coach K isn't sitting there for an hour and a half, 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon stressing over if he's going to pick Oregon or Memphis for the top 10 spot, right? Like, I would want my basketball coach fired probably if he was putting that much time into a coach's poll that doesn't matter. But the AP poll, this is their only job. Their only job is to report on college basketball. And so I don't understand how there can be such monster variances when it comes to how these people vote. You know, we have a team in here like Utah State. Some people have them at 11 and some people have them not ranked. Well, how many of the writers do you think have even watched a Utah State game this year? I'm going to guess 5. Am I too high or too low? Am I too high or too low with that?
You're probably right, and they're going to keep winning games, so they're going to keep moving up the rankings because they're not going to play anyone. But it's my point is, and I think we're saying the same thing here. It's
no, we are.
Football.
Yeah, we are.
It's, college football, like there would be a mutiny if the correct 4 teams didn't make the playoff at the end of the year. College basketball, so much is built off of big wins, right? If you don't have the big win, if you are, let's pick a run-of-the-mill team that will probably be on the bubble this year. Let's call it, let's go with like Arkansas. All right, if Arkansas doesn't beat a team in the top 25 this year and they go 20-11, they're not going to make the tournament. If NC State goes 21-10 and they don't have a win over a top 25 team, they're not going to make the tournament. But if Arkansas were to beat Tennessee later in the year and Tennessee was ranked at X points whenever it happened, like, then this means something. So you can't just throw in the towel. Like, I feel like when I'm talking about this stuff, I listened to the Mike Lombardi's podcast on the GM Shuffle, and all he ever does, literally all this guy does on his podcast, is just say the same things over and over again. He'll say Mitch Trubisky's terrible. He'll say that the Patriots have a great culture. He'll say he'll say that bad offensive lines don't travel well, and then he'll just, when he's outraged by something, he'll just go, seriously, oh, seriously, and he just says seriously like 17 times in a row. This will be my Mike Lombardi stance, and then I'll throw in some like Junior Soprano quotes or Ralphie Cifaretto quotes when I have to. But literally, I could be Lombardi on this topic right here. You have to take the rankings seriously.
I mean, I allowed against this and have been forever. I even on this show last week or over the last couple of weeks, I've been saying how worthless like the preseason polls are, especially, and how that affects everything we have going on. I mean, Florida is out here still in half of the people's top 25 bracket. or top 25 vote.
Yeah, and Kentucky loses to a terrible team and just goes to 9.
Yeah,
Like,
and no, there was
come on.
nobody even voted them outside the top 15.
It's
That was their widest variance. And you're like, well, so I swear to God, if Arizona had lost to Evansville, they'd be out of the poll without question. There's no question in my mind that Arizona would be in others receiving votes. There's zero question in my mind if that would happen. But they barely beat 2 teams now, and lost to one of them, and are still in the top 10. And then a team like Florida, who albeit isn't in the top 25, but is still being voted in there, and they could have lost every game so far, and to have lost 2 of them, it's just absurd to me of how much that is pushed just because they simply watched the games. Now, or watched the Florida game, but didn't watch like a Utah State game, right? So there is another point to this, and I think we see this on the West more so than in the East, and I think it's more of a mindset thing than anything else. I think a lot of West Coast basketball reporters go so far to show or to try and show that they're not biased, that they go like to the anti-bias route, that they actually vote their teams lower just so they don't get called out on being, oh, well, you're the West Coast contrarian. East Coast people don't give a fuck. East Coast people don't give a fuck. They're going to say, they vote for whoever they want to, right? And they'll say, whatever, fuck you and your opinion.
The 2 guys that voted this way, one is a Florida guy, the other one's a Midwest guy. So why don't you leave the East Coast out of it? Right?
Okay. Well, so I did some research to back this point up. Okay.
Upstanding individuals in the East Coast.
I did some research to back this up, and I took a guy that I know and read often, and that's Bruce Pascoe in Tucson, U of A's beat writer. Over the course of his voting career, he's voted Arizona 3 spots lower than the average, on average, for the entire time he's voted in the poll. Meaning he takes the team that he covers and votes them lower than the poll every time.
Over how many years?
Several. I'm not sure the exact amount, but several. Like not just this year, but over a number of years. This has continued on. I looked at a guy like John Wilner. He's a Washington guy. He has generally voted Washington several spots lower than the norm. And then I can't remember the Oregon guy off the top of my head here, but he's done the same. He's something like 2.5 spots lower. So there's this weird. It's almost like the West Coast fans complain about East Coast bias when it comes to rankings, and then the West Coast media people like cower to it, if that makes sense. Where they're like, oh yeah, our team's good, but like nobody watched us, so we don't want to have to actually prove it. So let's just vote them to 15 instead of 12, so we don't have to worry about it. And we've always had this complaint out here in Arizona, is that you look at Arizona will lose a game to Oregon State, right? And they drop like 6 spots. A team like Duke will go and lose at a school like, I don't know, Clemson, and they'll fall 1 spot. And this happens every single week of the year. And that might sound like a biased whatever take, but if anyone wants to dive into that, I'm more than welcome to have the argument with you, because we can go back and look at all the polls. And
what's stopping? You're saying that the beat writers underrank their teams. I mean, isn't there something to be said that your boy Bruce in Arizona? I mean, he was kind of right. Like, you guys have never made a Final Four in recent time frame here. So,
well, right, but you look back at the years where, let's say, Arizona that was like 22-0 and was like almost the unanimous number 1 team in the country, and had the most appearances at number 1 that year. And here's the local guy not shelling for his home team. But then what I want is the local guys to shell for their own teams, just like the Duke guy. The Duke beat writer is sucking Coach K's dick 24/7. And that's what I want from the beat writer. I don't want them to try and tell us that the team isn't as good, because then, like you said, these things actually do matter, despite the fact that they don't really in the on-court stuff. They do matter when it comes to tournament time. And so It's a weird West Coast contrarian. We don't want to conform, or we don't want to make anybody upset. So let's just not even worry about voting them too high, because then we're gonna have to upset people. Whereas like the East Coast writers are like, they're going to sleep before the West Coast writers would even have an argument with them anyway.
But so are you asking for the West Coast writers to lie about how good their teams are and vote for them higher than they should be?
No, I'm asking them to not. I'm not asking them to not be like anti-biased. They every year they go out of their way to make it look like they aren't biased. Whereas look at Jeff Goodman. Jeff Goodman is an Arizona alum. Jeff Goodman is the worst guy in the world, especially when it comes to Arizona stuff. Guy literally just shits on the entire program 24/7 at any time. Picks against them every single time. And I'm like, dude, what is wrong with you? Like, you don't have to go so far out of your way to prove that you're not biased. Like, just call a spade a spade. If the team is good, it's good. If the team is not, it's not. And so West Coast schools and beat writers especially go way out of their way to prove that they aren't biased. And in reality, it makes them, it's like anti-bias, or however you want to phrase that.
Don't bring up Goodman on me here. I made a vow at the beginning of the season I wasn't going to attack Hack Goodman anymore this year.
He's the worst.
I told that to people. I've been going at Goodman since 2008 in Conti Forum. He's been my nemesis. All right. I don't push me on Goodman here. All right. I want to say what you're saying, but I made a promise I'm not going to go at Hack.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to bring up. I didn't know there was I should have respected the safe word before Goodman.
We're in the we're in a what I like to call like a ceasefire, we are Israel and Palestine. We're we're in the Gaza Strip, like we're taking a few plays off here, and that this year is right. It happens to be this season. I'm giving them a year.
So to kind of wrap this up, or not wrap this up, because I don't want to make it seem like an argument that I'm trying to push on people, but we are major college basketball fans, right? You, me, Subi, whatever. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're obviously a major college basketball fan. So you should know that if you look at some of these writers, there should be a question as to why some of these writers or media people are even on this list in the first place. Like Dick Vitale is the perfect example. Dick Vitale is having like Metamucil at 8 p.m. and Eastern and going to sleep. He's not watching a single game outside of the one he's calling. And so I actually think that a major way to make this poll better would be that you're not allowed to be a commentator or an announcer on a game. Because if you're commentating on a game, that means you're not paying attention to any of the other games in like the 7 p.m. Eastern time slot, which means that there's 30 other major games going on at the same time. So I don't understand why some people, especially the casual fan, put so much credence into like Dick Vitale's opinion when he's not watching anything at all.
Yeah, I agree. I like that rule, but it's kind of the same thing in every sport. You got the talking heads on TV, on ESPN all the time, pretending like they watch some of that Redskins Jets game on Sunday to like know all these things.
Well, I don't know if that's a great example because they're like the two worst teams in the league. Well, two of the 5 worst teams in the league. So I think there's a good reason to not have watched that game. But there's a probably pretty good reason why you should be watching like Oregon's game, right? And my thing that I hate is the argument is always like, oh well, it was late, or we had to get up early, or we had some other functions to go to, or whatever. And as a person, fine, that's completely understandable, right? But if your sole job is to be the expert on a sport that happens between 7 and 11 p.m. every single night from October to early April, I don't want to hear about your excuses about why you couldn't watch and pay attention to the games. Like, then maybe we get someone else to do this. I
completely agree. These guys need to be held more accountable, and I think the whole point of the website that you pointed out is to hold them accountable. But like, what's the remedy for Stephen Means just literally just throwing crap up against the wall? There's got to be something.
Yeah, because you're not going to lose your credentials because you're a bad AP voter. I mean, I guess maybe the AP, because it's not the same voters every year; it rotates. So perhaps the powers that be in the AP will, I don't know, have some kind of system to kick out all the outliers. Like a guy like John Rothstein should be an AP voter, right?
We should just Rothstein should just do the rankings.
Right. And
like,
I really like his rankings generally but you know that he's in the lab every night, like grinding over his picks.
Yeah.
You know, he's oh God, 15 or 16. He's going through all the metrics. He's watching the replays. He's probably putting too much time and effort into it, honestly. And then you got a guy like Steven Means who's literally putting the teams that lose ahead of the teams that win, and that's just absurd. So, do you want to wrap that up in any way? I know I kind of rambled there for a while, but
no, I don't. I think if there's one takeaway from this topic, it's to keep an eye on these guys. Keep an eye on them. Get to know some of these guys. Like I've been lost in looking up all these people. I'm going to keep an eye on your boy Bruce Pascoe and see how he ranks these West Coast teams. What has he got Arizona at right now?
I don't even know.
20. He's got him at 20th.
Right, so exactly.
He's playing hard to get, your boy Bruce. I like it.
And I'd love to hear a reason as to why he thinks Arizona, for example, isn't. Where does he have Oregon? Do you have it pulled up right now?
I do. Brucey's got Oregon 12.
Okay. So I'd love to hear a reason as to why he thinks both of those schools are lower than what they've been ranked at. Because I bet you that there isn't. And even though this guy is supposedly watching the team, I don't know how you look at a team like, say, Arizona right now or Oregon and go, oh, man, well, we really shouldn't have moved them up very much because they've smoked everybody. And I bet Kentucky is still ahead of both of those. And they have a loss to Evansville. And that just doesn't make any fucking sense at all.
Kentucky is.
Where does he have Kentucky?
9.
Yeah, right. Right. There's no reason for that at all. But okay, but we could probably go on about this for days. So, do you have anything else that's really pressing on your mind before we get to some hugs here?
No, the only other things I wanted to bring up, I guess, were there's another little mini tournament going on in Madison Square Garden this week. Are you kidding me? How many little tournaments are you gonna have here? This one's called the 2K Empire Classic. If you're looking for games to watch this week, I guess the best one you're looking at is Texas versus Georgetown in Madison Square Garden. I kind of like this Georgetown team. I love their point guard, Akinjo. It's my guy. I'm eyeing Georgetown in that matchup.
I want to say that you're not allowed to claim James Akinjo as your guy because
he's not my guy. Yeah, you can have him.
Because I claimed him in the preseason here. So
you
can have Oregon, but I'm going to keep Akinjo.
No, right? I'm my list, my boys so far this year. My list of boys right now, I'm at Peyton Pritchard, number 1. Number 2 is going to be Skylar Mays on LSU.
Okay.
Love that guy. So to steal a Rothstein here, so much Malcolm Brogdon and Skylar Mays, and then my other one would be Miles Powell.
Okay.
But I'm still working on rounding out my roster. Those are my big 3 to start out the year.
I'm going to be on Kira Lewis Jr. pretty hard as my boy as this season goes along as well. So before we get into some hugs, we have a quick message from the Barn Burner Podcast Network. All right, Shark. So let's round this trip up to Minnesota with a nice warm hug. Who do you got?
Yeah, so my hug, if you're like me, you've probably been popping in, checking the scores of random games throughout the year so far, wondering, okay, this isn't a great game on this Monday, this isn't a great game on that Tuesday, but Mike is going to go to this team, Nichols. Now, Nichols is a school that is playing a schedule tougher than can't think of a good thing that's tough, right? Tougher than a shovel. That's one I like saying a lot. They're based out of Thibodaux, Louisiana, all right? Thibodaux, Louisiana. Great Louisiana name. And Nichols is playing a tough schedule. But the reason I want to point out Nichols is their head coach is not even actually he's turning 30 years old today.
Wow.
So
he's younger than us. He's younger than you and I also.
He is.
His Scorpio as well. Not that I give a fuck about that, but
we had my birthday was my 30th was the other day when we talked about action and all that. You got this guy, Austin Clouch. I mean, first of all, terrible name. The last name is rough, Clouch. But he is a head basketball coach in college for a college basketball team at 29. Actually, what's today's date? Where am I right
now? Today is the 19th or
the 19th?
The 20th when this is published, but yeah.
He just turned 30th on the 17th. So nice. Clouch here, his first game, he goes into Pitt, beats Pitt. Now, mind you, Pitt beat who the hell Pitt beat earlier this year?
Purdue. Did they beat Purdue?
No. Florida State.
Ah, yeah, there you go. Yeah, 69-67. Yeah.
But Clouch didn't give a fuck. Clouch went in there and beat the crap out of him. And then Clouch was like, all right, we're gonna play Purdue, no big deal. Then we're gonna play a school called Paul Quinn. All right. Paul Quinn. It's literally like picture a guy whose last name is Quinn, and then that guy's first name is Paul. Like it's literally a guy's name. That's the name of the school, Paul Quinn. I have no clue where they're based out of. And then so Clouch got his first win there, and then he went to LSU and played LSU tough.
Yeah, they did.
And then he did it again today. He went up and played URI, and my boy Scards boy, Fats Russell. Boy, we're like doing an inception of boys right there. But Fats Russell, URI, kind of a sleeper team. Look out for them going on throughout this year. He actually had a real good game tonight. He had 22, 6, and 5 steals. But Austin Clouch, watch out for this guy.
Okay.
I got my eye on Nichols, and the thing with Nichols was they actually beat Boston College a few years ago. So they're a dangerous school out of Thibodaux. Hug for Nichols.
I can't wait to come back and reference this in the archives in 3 years when like Clouch gets the UNC job or something like that. And you can really you really should tweet this actually just to make sure that you're on the board.
No, I save my tweets for very precise moments like my Seton Hall, my Oregon one. But Clouch, 4-year starter at Elon, got my eye on him.
I feel like this could be an all risk or all reward, no risk tweet though, because nobody's going to come call you out on Clouch not getting a big job.
I don't want to do it right now. I want them to lose a few more games if they can. Okay. Clouch is actually kind of dialing down the gauntlet of the schedule. His next big game is against West Virginia on December 14th, and that will be appointment television for me.
Big hug, big warm hug from Minnesota. Well, my hug is going to be for another cold place, and I'm going to go to Montana basketball as a whole, but specifically to Harold Frey, who had a half-court buzzer beater to beat UNC Greensboro the other day. After UNC Greensboro scored a layup with like 3 seconds left, my man Harold, spelled Harald, Harald Frey, hit a half-court buzzer beater to put Montana State over UNC Greensboro. UNC Greensboro played a couple squads this year. Actually a decent team. But then another hug I'm going to give to, and this is going to be more of a sad hug, is to the University of Montana, who lost to NAIA Montana Tech the other night. So you have a Montana Tech or a Montana State team who was picked 7th in their conference, just going above and beyond, hitting half-court buzzer beaters. And then you have a University of Montana team who was picked 1st in the conference, losing to an NAIA school, which pretty much, I'm guessing you and I probably could have started on that team in our prime at an NAIA level. I'm just guessing. So
I feel like the only states where you can lose to a Tech is Georgia, Virginia, and Texas. Outside of that, you can't lose to no Techs.
Yeah, right. Those are like the only schools that have Techs in the first place.
Well,
really.
I think the other states have a Tech, and they're they play like a Tech.
Like ITT Tech?
Yeah.
I don't think they have a squad. Is that still around? Are those infomercials still on?
I don't know. Well, I can't believe I did this to Nichols. Their first game, they played at Illinois. They took Illinois to overtime.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I can't believe you just left your boy Clouch.
Clouch is an animal. He's an animal. He'll play anyone, anywhere.
He probably outcoached Underwood in that game. Subi's boy, Brad Underwood. So, well, let's wrap it up with this. We really hope that Subi is finding himself, or at least not dead, in the bottom of the Grand Canyon right now. That'll do it this week on Theater and College Hoops. We'll see if Subi makes it back, and we'll see you next time.